Hi everyone, it's Kasia from Tarot Map. Today is spring equinox. I'm in this beautiful place called Juliana in Croatia. I'm at the beach by myself, it's really peaceful, and I have watched this morning an amazing lecture by one of my teachers, Polish teachers. Her name is Ania Miłuńska, and while I was watching, this lecture is in Polish. While I was watching it, I was transcribing it and translating it into English because it made me think so much. And even though, some of this we all know, but I thought it's so important to create new stories. Spring equinox starts with the sign of Aries. It's the beginning of the whole zodiacal cycle. And I think it's just really important to think right now, to stop and think about what I'm just about to share with you. Because first of all, we are powerful. Second of all, we can create new myths. Third of all, we can create new stories or reconnect with the stories that were already told. We have these stories in our culture. We have these stories in all native cultures all over the world. And we can draw from this wisdom and wholeness of these stories. We can retell them anew. We do not have to subscribe to the story we are telling right now. So for the spring equinox, I thought I'd just mention, because Ania, the teacher, the lecture that I'm going to quote, kind of nearly, word by word, just translated into English. I will, of course, link the original lecture in my description box for anybody who speaks Polish. You can guys go and watch it. But I thought I'm going to bring, and I brought with myself from Poland, this Venus of Willendorf, because Ania Miłuńska is a lover of Maria Gimbutas, and she is a lover of this peaceful old European culture. And when I say peaceful old European culture, it was a matriarchal culture, and in the graves, when they were doing the archaeological tests and explorations, they didn't find any weapons. That's why they know that at some point the warrior culture came through, because what was more valued was your weapons when you were buried, Before that, we didn't have any of the weapons, so that was a peaceful, matriarchal, non-hierarchical culture. And I would love to, during the spring equinox, plant some seeds of this type of culture rebirthing itself again. I know that some of us really trying to continue this culture through, connecting present religious icons and spirits like Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, Christ, to this long lineage of native beliefs, earth-centered beliefs. And I think it is really important to remember where all these new religions come from, where all the items that we use in our magical workings come from. So I made notes, so I'm just going to go with this, and I just want you to listen and mingle and let it sink in, because this is for all of us, right? So she says that we have to move beyond the known, stick our heads beyond our known stories. The myth of our world right now is the myth of fight, of war, of winning. It's the myth of the hero, right? We have, these dualities, light and dark. We have good and bad, life and death. And when you start thinking about it, how we think about them as opposite that need to fight with one another, it's kind of a touch ridiculous as an idea. Day is good, night is bad, light is good, darkness is bad, life is good, death is bad, where this duality and this idea of those opposite being at war, it's just pure fucking crazy. So we can describe these two forces like in old European goddess culture, which is more like a spiral. One thing comes in, the other thing comes out, and they connect it like day or night. How can we even value night as bad? We all need night. We sleep at night, we rest at night, we dream at night. And how can night be bad compared to day? So when we think good or bad, if we subscribe good to lightness and badness to darkness, how in just logical mind, what a crazy idea this is. So in our present myth, good and bad just fight with one another, right? We think lightness is good, darkness is bad. And in old cultures, the light comes from darkness, right? And it flows through this creative void, through the mystery. Even if the ancient ancestors of ours didn't speak about God, the whole earth, the mother earth was the mystery, was the cosmos. There were gods, right? There were these great forces that feed us, that hold us, that we are part of. And the whole creation is part of the Great Mother, and the Great Mother feeds us. She is the primordial source and holds all of the opposites and unites them. So the old yin and yang symbol, this is such a beautiful way of showing that everything is part of everything. Every lightness has a bit of darkness and vice versa, and it's all in constant motion. So we have a couple of myths that belong to this huge myth of hero, and duality in our world can be described in many different ways. They don't have to fight with one another, right? Man and woman, light and death, right, left, earth, sky. None of the directions are better or worse. So when we start reshifting how we think about duality and stop and step out of this constant judgment and moral hierarchy, it's really it just becomes so ridiculous what we're doing. So we can think of duality like two heads and one body, or like two sides of the same coins, right? It's like this double spiral. From winter solstice till summer solstice, the spiral is unwinding. From summer solstice till winter solstice, the spiral is winding down. None of this is better or worse. Here we're getting more life and growth and sun. Here we're getting more death and rest and renewal. So thinking about it as two fighting opposites, it's a bit crazy. Peace in general means giving and receiving, not taking, receiving. That's a difference. And beauty is the essence of life. Beauty, the creativity. And giving and sharing and receiving is our deepest longing and belonging. That's how we belong to the world. So the fight of the opposites, it's really a very old patriarchal myth. And there are possibilities of new stories, of retelling that split, that duality. And we have those stories already. So our myth that we live in, the myth of the hero, the myth of war, the myth of fighting, is based on the ethos of war. This is hero's myth, most often told by winners, right? So it is hierarchical, it is racist, it is good light fights the bad darkness. And we project this myth onto God, we project this myth onto any aspect of our life, really. And that's why every obstacle, every challenge becomes our enemy. Every unknown, every person that is different from us becomes our enemy. We have to conquer it. We have to conquer our weaknesses. We can to conquer ourselves. We have to conquer our world, our diets, the list is endless. When we stop and think about it, we live in the myth of war. We speak the language of war. And this is really a very old story. And I would love us at this spring equinox to really stop and think about it, because we are all part of it. None of us is exempt, but we can change it, and we have to start with ourselves. So when you think about this myth of war, myth of fight, we're thinking and speaking the language of war. We project fighting onto the world, onto our life. Sickness, old age, virus, we need to kill it, we need to conquer it, we need to win with it. We don't speak of cooperation, coexistence, co-creating. After, like, look at this language. After a very long fight with cancer, they lost the battle with cancer. Don't give up, fight to the end. Even the climate change, the fight for climate change. On the scene of fight for environment comes a new generation of activists. This is all perpetuating this old myth that we are embedded in. And yes, it's hard to change, but we have to start with ourselves. As soon as we start catching ourselves at the way we think, the way we speak, don't fight yourself, just accept it, see it for what it is. So we are constantly on a battlefield in our heads, in our language, and that's how fighters speak. That's how soldiers maybe are, brought up to speak. My body becomes my enemy. Illness, weakness, old age, feeling sad, feeling, not like a winner today. We don't value these feelings. We want to fight them. And the myth really expresses the way of life and the way of our culture. I think that's why maybe, a lot of native people who still preserve their old cultures look at the Western world, the Western culture, that myth of fight, of hierarchy, of bigger versus smaller, higher versus lower, that vertical kind of, always up, up, up. And probably they think, what the fuck is wrong with these people, So to change the myth of war, we really need to pay attention to our language, practice the language of peace. And I think this is my greatest wish for this spring equinox, when I'm able to be in a peaceful environment while we know what's happening beyond my country's border in the Ukraine. Let's start changing this myth of war. Let's start talking in the language of peace. So the first step is really to create a peaceful world. Starts with us people, it starts with us, it starts with us using the language of peace. So we have the power to do it. We have the power from within. We can start noticing where our language takes us onto a battlefield. And it will be a long maybe journey, because we're so infused in it. It's unseen and yet omnipresent. So let's imagine, let's speak peaceful language. The fight, is unfortunately still considered the most optimal way to act. We value fight. We need to win or we lose. That's another ethos of this power, conquering, and this possessing. So if we want to catch attention in our culture, we use the language of war. Look at the media. Anytime the war breaks up in any country, look at the media if they want to really hook you into something. It's usually the bad versus good. Look at YouTube thumbnails that make fucking millions of views. That hooks us, because war language, fight, that duality that we're so embedded in, it's really like stirs our emotions, because as humans we very emotional beings, and if we want to catch attention, look at the headlines, that's enough to know. And this is a spot when we can actually stop and take a deep look. Where are we personally upholding this language? Where are we personally hooked into this drama? Where are we having those inner fights, you know, outer battles? What are we valuing? Where do we put our energy into? Can we, and are we ready, as personally, as a human being right now, become humans that do not have to win? If we win, someone loses, right? So how do we step out of this dichotomy, of this difference, of this push for winning, push for rat race, push for better, more, never enough? So this is a field of transformation. This is actually where we do have so much power. This is where we can influence our own behavior and really change the world and myths and stories and language that we are telling, that we are using. Because as you know, language carries powerful energy. It transforms our world, it transforms how people see us, it transforms our communication, it transforms how we create and co-create world. So we also have this ethos of control and power, the hero mentality, the myth that values the winners, you know. Who wins has power. That's the structure of our world. Who loses is weak. It's you know, it's a crazy hippie, it's somebody who always gives, they have nothing, they have no money, they have no power. They are not winners in this type of society that we do not want to uphold. In our world, those who are higher have more value, those who are lower have less value. And this is projected onto God. God loves these people, but not these people. God doesn't like gays, but it loves politicians who create wars, you know. So when you really stop and think about these values and how we put them together to fight each other, it's really crazy. So language of peace without this like moral judging, always up is better, or any level, even in spiritual words, you know, higher vibrations, lower vibrations, spiritual but not material. This is embedded in every aspect of our life. So are we really ready to renounce that hierarchy and our need or zest for power, for control? We start with ourselves. We see how we desperately trying to control life. Like, you know, when I start thinking about it, wow, so guilty as charged, you know. And it's so easy to, like, it's omnipresent. So it's like when stepping out of it, you feel crazy, like something is wrong with you because the whole world is, like, you know, behaving differently. But this is where we do have initial individual personal power to start shifting it, so that our children see differently, so that our friends see differently, so that we do have the possibility to create, at least around us, a different response to reality, a different myth, a different story. Emotional gratification of power, you know, needs a lot of honest work, because we all addicted to power. We all like to have control over life, over money, over jobs. You know, it's very hard to retrain yourself to think differently. We judge people when we look at them. Oh, these people, they always buy shit, you know. Or look at her, or like Natalia used in her shadow work course, which is really amazing, you know, how she was looking at the neighbor having like this convertible car and how she was judging him straight away. Like, we have this moral higher, lower embedded into our morality, into our psyche. So this old myth is very strong, is very deep within us, but the language, we have power over it. We can change it. We can start noticing it. We can see where we battling, the world, battling life. So also there is this ethos of having and of possession, and possessing goods, possessing land. For native people, possessing land was like the most ridiculous idea you can even think of. We are so trained that we cannot think differently, but maybe we can. Maybe we can change it. Maybe it can go somehow back to other way of treating land with much more respect, much more love, much more care, much more nurturing. But for us, for our culture, it's normal to possess land, to buy land. I'm looking to buy land in Croatia, right? It's like stepping out of this wheel that's rolling. It's really, really hard. So I think stopping and seeing, can we truly possess anything in this life, really? How can we turn away from thinking like this? And I think what's really lovely where Ania came to is like that it's a deep, deep, deep philosophical question when it comes down to it's the fear of death, because we praise and value what's lasting, what's eternal, what's higher in spiritual realms as better than the elusive, changeable, constantly diminishing, or like changing and shifting like nature. So we put God up into the heavens, and yet we at the same time destroy earth, our mother. And if we want to possess, we don't want to change. We want to hold on to shit because we feel safe holding on to stuff, but that's not life. And actually, nature is constantly moving, our bodies are constantly changing, life is constantly shifting. So is it a lower world? Is it worse than what we imagine it should be? No, it is life. It's reality of things. It's how life is. So she says that we need to either control life, and that's what our culture likes to do, have this power over life, conquer life, age, bodies, world, or we free ourselves of it, like we remove ourselves from mortality, from physical reality, from material world, from engaging with pleasure, with joy. And our biggest enemy in the end is death. And we are passing, we are elusive, we are drifting away, we are dying with every breath we're taking. And this even language of we dying with every breath we're taking, it depicts beautifully that double spiral, that unseparation of these seemingly dual forces, right? So we negate what life truly is. And we try to hold on myths that in the end kill life. So the rebirth, dying, coming to life again, the essence of life is this change and transformation, and denying this mechanism of life and death, like lightness and darkness working in unison. It's actually disconnecting us. It makes us anxious. It feels like we don't belong, like we don't have connection to life. We're fearful. And then we try to control, try to hold on to those, societal ways of feeling safety, which it's enough for the war in a country next to you to happen. And I'm the greatest example of how fucking fearful and scared I was, and how I wanted to remove myself straight away and not feel it because it's so hurtful. So if we follow this unseen pattern, if we feel like we're constantly at war in our language, in our bodies, in our heads, if we fear life if the fear rather than life motivates us to act, to do something, to say something, to reach out to something, that's where we need to stop. And that's where we need to see life for what it is, see ourselves for what it is. And the language of the goddess, as Maria Gimbutas calls it, the language of affirming life, of practicing, of the rhythm of time, of the natural moving of nature and us as being part of it, the shifting of the priorities and how we see weak and strong day and light and darkness and night. It's part of this retraining our brains and the way we speak, the way we think. And time is not linear. We cannot possess life, control life. We cannot build a peaceful world if we don't build a peaceful relation with life as it is, changing, surprising, adventurous. And also in the end, we need a new myth that affirms life, that lets us not be so afraid of death, that describes life as it is, showing us how we can uphold life and cooperate with life and not conquer it, not make it, not tame it. It's impossible. So on every level, this personal and social, how can we cooperate with life, including the language and thoughts that we using and thinking and speaking? So my wish for all of us is really that for our world right now is to transform the story of the hero, of the fight, of the war, of control, of possession, into the story of compassion, into the story of cooperation, into the story of joy, into the story of fluidity and flow and renewal and death. From emperors and kings and gods to loving mother, to supporting father, to joyous child. And I thought to finish off, because it's a very long video and I hope you guys, are still with me. I wanted to change the camera and actually show you a little spread that I invented after I listened to this lecture. And as I said, these were words, paraphrased words of Ania Miłuńska, and I'm going to link her lecture below. So as you can see, I took a couple of chimes. I don't know if you can hear it. These are the two decks that I thought I'm going to work with today. And I took those symbols of the peaceful world, the peaceful language. So I thought, after I listened to this interview to this lecture, that an important question to ask would be in what area of life can I start practicing the language of peace? So if you pull the major arcana, just take a look at all aspects and see which maybe sign the major arcana is connected to. If you feel lost for interpretation, watch at the image that you draw. So here for me, I see this is the physical, so where I can start practicing the language of peace is through my work. It's through feeling maybe safe, patient. I'm very impatient. Thinking about money a certain way, about possessions, right? This possessiveness versus control. I love this little star here. I think there is I see it as an idea, a new embodied in the red idea. And I want you to look at the cards in this way. And of course, journal, see your first impressions before your head totally kicks in. And this is something that, it's really important for right now. So the next question I wrote is, what am I most afraid of? So this is a little bit like a shadow questions that we might not see. And again, what am I most afraid of? So if you pull a card, it's interesting for me because, as you know, I'm planning to move. I want to find a new home. I want to buy land. Very fight language, or the old story, right? Maybe I will shift this. Maybe I will change this. But I am afraid right now of peaceful home, of the area where I feel welcomed, where I feel at peace, when I feel happy, when I feel stable, safe, connected to others as well. So this is something that is really important to me. And this is when I'm afraid to lose it, because when I left my country right now, I know that a lot of people from Russia, from Ukraine, from Poland, we are all shifting because we probably feel what might come, and we're afraid of it. We're afraid of losing that joy that comes from connecting with your people, with your land. The third question is, how can I embrace this fear or nurture it? So here is when we start to embrace this language of peace. Not conquer the fear, not get rid of the fear, but how can I nurture and embrace the fear? What helps me? And what helps me is, in this case, maybe buy land. I don't know, I feel like I might be biased, but I would love to plant my veggies. I would like to connect to the land that I'm on. I want to get to know the plants. I want to have a garden. I want to be closer to nature. I don't want to live in a block. And it's something, how can I embrace this? How can I nurture this fear? Maybe through my body, maybe through being gentler to myself, through offering good food, good thoughts, everything that sparkles and gives me life, sustains me, nurtures me. And I think this is quite interesting, right? Because where I can practice the language of peace and how can I embrace the fear comes from Pentacles element. And Pentacles, it's very earthy element. It has to do with our biological karma. It has to do with our conditioning. It has to do with our food, with our body, with our homes, with our money, everything that's material. And I think that's interesting because I feel still I have this big split in me, spiritual, material, and even though I've been working on it for years, it's really hard to step out of this dichotomy, this destructive duality, and I want to start seeing this duality in a different way, give it a new story, a new twist. And the last one is, what is the message from our ancient ancestors regarding this shifting, this practicing the language of peace? What is the grandmother in the rock here that I come to her and I prepared her a little altar? What are our ancient ancestors from all over the world? What are they teaching us right now? And this is 10 of Wands. First impressions. Release the struggle. Release the struggle. Release the need to get somewhere. Release the possessions. Release maybe the attachment to things. Attachment to your dreams even in some way. Lighten the load. That's what comes to me. This is a big spread. Obviously, this is not finished. This is something that I'm going to be sitting with and journaling and thinking of today. But I just wanted to share it. I also took Margaret Peterson Tarot, which I'm going to use as well. You can use a couple of decks for the same questions, or pick 7 of Pentacles from this deck, see how they make you feel and think about the image, how the image reflects what, some familiar decks can make you go a certain way, and some decks that you use for more philosophical, spiritual pursuits might help you to see it from a little bit more mythological perspective. And this is what we want to do. We want to shift our traditional way of seeing things and what we value, and catch ourselves every time we do it, and stop and just notice and give ourselves, a pat on the back for trying, for doing it, for look at this cutest little shell. I don't know if you can see it, but it's so sweet. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope I didn't lose you on the way. I thought it was important to share. I wanted to share with you, and let me just show you around to finish this off. So I hope you are doing okay wherever you are, and Oh, let's just walk over to this grandma. I call it the granny beach. And here is the little altar with plants, and I put Amma here as also a symbol really of a peaceful mother that gives a hug and holds everyone who comes. So yes, thank you.